Before you take anything that I say as the gospel, you need to know something. I'm here with you today because I essentially failed at three things, right? The first thing was I failed at becoming a great attorney, all right? I went to law school because I was inspired by Thurgood Marshall. Does everybody here know Thurgood Marshall? All right, so I grew up fascinated by what he did in shaping history and how he pursued a line of cases that wound up ultimately in Brown versus the Board of Education, how he won more cases in front of the Supreme Court than anyone, how he was the first African-American Supreme Court justice. So I was incredibly inspired by that, and I said, you know what? I want to become the next Thurgood Marshall. So I went to law school, except when I came out, I wound up a corporate securities lawyer. And I don't know how many of you know what being a corporate securities lawyer is like, but it's about as far from being Thurgood Marshall as you can become. All right, so I spent my time drafting documents, mergers and acquisition agreements, things that made lots of people lots of money, but it certainly didn't impact any social change. So I looked down the road and decided that this was just not how I saw my life turning out. I was good at it, but I never was going to have the passion to be great at it. So my first failure was I wasn't a great attorney. My second failure was when I got done practicing law. So I joined a big law firm in Dallas, did that for 3 years, then I went to work in the White House in the Clinton administration, and that was fascinating, although had the misfortune of being there during the Monica Lewinsky scandal. So you can imagine what it's like to spend 1.5 years of your life trying to talk about everything but sex, right? Did not turn out very well, by the way. So after I got done talking about sex, I went back to practice law in Dallas and joined a boutique firm, and we represented a family, a very influential family in Texas who had many, many different holdings, and I learned the value of how business really gets done, right? How deals are done, who does them, how you speak, the language, the way you carry yourself. That was the best apprenticeship that I could have ever had. But ironically, what the partners at that small boutique law firm told me was they said, listen, some lawyers are too important to practice law. We're counselors. So that revolutionized the way I looked at the practice of law. So we did that for a while. Then I joined a public affairs firm where I developed an expertise in solving very complicated and tricky crises, right? I was the guy you called when you needed something to go away and it needed to get off of the front page of the paper. Now, nowadays, people, I tell them that and they say, oh, you were like Olivia Pope. Yeah, do I look like Olivia Pope? Right? Like Olivia Pope, it's a whole different ballgame. She did it at a level which I could not, frankly, have imagined. I dealt with things a little different and far more corporate related. So I enjoyed that. But I developed an expertise while doing that where I worked with professional athletes and people who aspired to be professional athletes. So I started getting a reputation as a guy that families could call and would help them in handling situations with the basketball culture. My deal with them was very simple. I will help you, but understand, one, if you have a high school student, he's being recruited, I'm going to try and convince you to send your child to the best academic school that they can get into. I think you use your athletic gifts to create academic opportunities and professional opportunities for yourself that last long after the bouncing stops with the basketball. I said, the second thing you need to understand is I refuse to accept any money from you. Because in that culture, everyone is looking for something. Right? They want a handout. They want an edge. They want a gift. I didn't want any of that. I was in it because I wanted to help people have better lives. So that was a wonderful opportunity. And as you can imagine, a guy in that business that didn't want money got lots of clients, right? So one thing led to another, and I started my own company eventually, and half of the clients were Fortune 100 companies, and the other half were prospective NBA draft picks. And some of the people that I worked with were people like Chris Bosh. You guys know Chris Bosh? Yeah. You know Darren Williams? Darren Williams is one of my clients. Those of you who are from the Big Ten country, you might remember a guy by the name of Bracy Wright, who was all Big Ten at Indiana University. He was one of our clients. And my job was to take them, repackage them, create a brand for them, and then help influence their draft pick spot by waging essentially a political campaign. So that was a lot of fun. I loved it. I've been to the green room. I was at the draft. Went to planned draft parties. We can have that conversation later. That's a whole different life, and it's pretty fun. But eventually you get to a place where, for me, I always liked the management side. So a group of guys I went to Duke with, and some of you may remember them if you're true Michigan fans, Christian Laettner and Brian Davis. Okay, I understand. We won, you lost. I got it, all right. Don't be too bent out of shape about that, Michigan fans. But they tried to buy the Memphis Grizzlies, and they hired me to help that bid process. And if we had won, if we had been successful, I would have wound up being president of the Grizzlies. So I was working very, very hard on that. But to give you a sense of how our efforts went, one of our investors was Michael Vick. Yeah, so remember I told you about Monica Lewinsky in the White House? Well, imagine trying to buy a basketball team with Michael Vick as one of your investors during the dog crisis. Right? So long story short, I failed at buying the basketball team. Right? So that's my second failure. That wound up not going very well. We were trying to get the Memphis Grizzlies, and ultimately it just didn't work out. But while I was in the process of doing that, I got a phone call from the chair of the board at Paul Quinn College, and he said, hey, how would you like to be president of Paul Quinn College? I said, I didn't interview for the job. He said, yeah, that's not a problem, all right? Which should have been my first clue, right? So I said, well, look, we're in the process of buying this basketball team, and if we're successful, I'm moving to Memphis to be president of the franchise, and I've already got my house picked out, life's about to be great, and I don't know what you're gonna pay me, but it's not gonna be more than they're gonna pay me, right? And he said, yeah, but this is a calling, this is a mission. I said, I respect that. I will send you lots of money from my new mission, right? And so he said to me, well, listen, think about it. Maybe you can do both. And I was like, can't do both. You can't live in Memphis and run a basketball team and run a college in Dallas. I was like, aren't you a member of the faith? Like, you got to tell the truth, right? Like, what are you doing? So, he says, think about it. So I go home and I know I'm in trouble, right? Because the thing you have to understand about me is that, I believe fundamentally at my core that sometimes the little guy should win, right? That sometimes you are given gifts in life to help, to serve, to leave places better than you found them. And anyone can show up and do the easy job. But you are blessed with your gifts to do things that really make a difference in the lives of people. So I called him back and I said, look, we've just submitted our bid for the NBA, and I'll give you 90 days. 90 days, and then you've got to find another president. That was 7 years ago. Okay? And during the course of that, we've been through lots of things. But the third failure, the third reason I'm in front of you is because I thought it'd be easy to get a set of restaurants and a grocery store in a community where there was nothing. Right? I mean, I studied business. I'm a reasonably bright guy. If you don't have anything and you bring it, you have a monopoly. So you should be able to make plenty of money in that area, right? Makes sense? No? Am I wrong? Makes sense. Thank you. Okay, I have like one person I like in this whole room, right? So, I thought that would be pretty simple. Well, as it turns out, it wasn't. I spent 2 years with people giving me every reason known to mankind why they wouldn't help bring a grocery store to a food desert. And I heard every excuse you can imagine. Finally, in fact, to show you how bad it was, we have 146 acres of land on our campus, and I offered to give free land to any grocer that would build a grocery store and just give jobs to people in the community. You know how many people took us up on that offer? None. We had no calls. It was like being the ugly guy at the dance, right? No one will dance with you, okay? It was horrible. Well, I'm sorry if I struck a little close to home for a couple of you with that last comment. What I can tell you is keep trying, all right? Keep trying. But the point is that these folks kept turning us down. And finally, one person said to me, he said, listen, I talked to my client and they won't come because they said the people in that neighborhood don't look like their customers. So here's what you need to know about that neighborhood. 98% minority. Median household income is around $24,000 a year. So you have poor minority people. But they eat, right? There's a need. So how can people not help? So now I'm mad, right? Now I'm really angry. And I said, you know what? First thing I did when I became a college president, I cut the football team, right? Which, by the way, you can never do in Michigan, but I think you know that, all right? We cut the football team, and because we couldn't afford it, and we were terrible, we lost every game, but, you know, why harbor on failures? So we turned the football field into an organic farm. 2 acres. We've grown over 20,000 pounds of food in the last 4 years. And let me be clear, we didn't know what we were doing, right? We didn't have an agricultural program. When the person I put in charge of the farm, when I called her and said, come to the meeting with the people from Pepsi, I asked her, I said, hey, didn't you major in economics in college? And she said, yeah. I said, great, you're going to run the farm. And she said, what? And I said, look, just Google it. We'll figure it out, all right? And that's a true story. Like, I literally told her that. And by the way, that is the most ridiculous thing ever, right? You cannot Google how to be a farmer and expect it to work, okay?